Hey there, and welcome to part 4 of our March LinkedIn Madness mini-series. My guest today is a sales consultant that helps companies build a better sales pitch. And he himself has over 15 years of sales experience. And one of the things he dives into on this episode is how salespeople aren't fully leveraging LinkedIn and all the features it has to offer. And what they are leveraging really isn't used in a very powerful way. He feels that salespeople have the opportunity to build themselves up as a trusted advisor and make human connections with prospects through the help of LinkedIn. Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, TREW Marketing. TREW is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit TREWmarketing.com. And now, on with our podcast. Hey everyone, I'm here with Nick Capozzi, CEO of Sales Pitching. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Hi, how are you, Wendy?
I am doing great. It's a beautiful day in Austin, Texas. How are you?
I'm fantastic. It's a beautiful day in Phoenix, Arizona. We've actually had cloud cover for like 10 days in a row.
Oh, for 10 days? I bet you got depressed. Like, I'm not used to this.
No, in Arizona, that's a good thing. We're excited to have it. Cool us off a little bit.
Great. Well, I am excited to talk to you because we need more sales energy and sales advice on this show. And I know that's what you do best. So can't wait to get into your head a little bit here.
Okay.
So you have such a fun LinkedIn profile as I go and I read about your background. And a big thing that stuck out is you spent 20 years in the cruise industry of all things. I don't know anybody that's done that. So tell me a little bit about your experience and what it taught you.
Yeah, so you know what the cruise business was for a long time, it really defined what I did. I was a cruise ship guy because like you said, like who really does that? And it was a fluke one day. I was in radio and someone said, "Hey, can you do that radio thing on a stage?" Next thing I know, I'm stepping on a cruise ship in Miami and we were doing live presentations. So we would get all these duty-free products and then we had to pitch them and talk about them. And I spent 20 years. I lived at sea for about a decade, worked my way up to an executive. Shoreside, was running duty-free for like 8 cruise lines at the same time. And the key thing that I learned from that, it's kind of the ultimate B2C environment, right? Like business to consumer environment. So one thing I had to do incredibly quickly, because there was so many options on the cruise ship, was I had to build rapport with people. I had to get them excited to want to talk to me and then get them to listen to what I was talking about. So as I've, merged into B2B post cruise ship career, and I'm doing a lot more consulting with sales, I really see an opportunity for B2B companies to be more relational and build more rapport with their clients. And the logic is, in my mind anyway, is that if I'm building rapport with someone, if there's 10 different products or services being offered and I can build an ally on their side, does that get me into the top 2, top 3, top 4, right? Just from a little conversational, rapport building opportunities.
Absolutely. I would think it does.
So that's I think the biggest takeaway, for me today, based off what I did in the cruise industry.
So tell me a little bit about what it is that you do. What you listen to sales conversations, right?
I listen to a lot of sales
A
conversations.
lot of you're
So
as good a listener as you are a talker.
yeah, absolutely. So this is funny. So what we did was we were pitching like 60 products in 60 minutes in duty free, right? Liquor, tobacco, but Swiss watches, high-end jewelry. And I started doing this in 2000. People would FedEx me their VHS tape. This is how old it is.
Awesome.
Of their presentation. And I would sit down and I would break it up, right? How was your tempo? Where did you pause? Was your scripting? Did you take them along kind of the path of the story? And, as I've converted to B2B, that's what I do now. It's just instead of on a live stage in front of 500 people, people are presenting in this little Zoom rectangle. And, so I sit in on a lot of presentations and I break apart, how they present and where there might be some more opportunities to take advantage.
So when you listen to these conversations, you mentioned a script. So tell me, so there might be marketers listening that this whole thing is kind of foreign to them.
Yep.
So is it typical that companies have a script? And if so, who creates that script? What does
That's
that
a
look like?
that's a great question, Wendy. And no one ever asked me that. And I love that you did. So I am a big fan of scripting as a launch point. So, the way I used to tell people, look, if I need you to learn your scripts, I need you to know it up, down, left, right, like your national anthem. And the reason for that is that if you're talking from a place of knowledge and you're not thinking, what's the next sentence that has come out of my mind, you can do things, you can move, you can work on body language, you can, eye contact. So I'm a big fan of scripting in general. When it comes to scripting, and if you're in marketing or you're an entrepreneur, the biggest thing I always tell people, the easiest way to start putting scripts together, because it's about 50-50 if companies have them or not. And honestly, if they have them, they can usually use a little tweaking. But one thing I always say is just talk about what you know for 30 minutes. So if you're talking about, you got a lot of great fishing stuff behind you, you know about fish. I don't know about fishing. You can teach me so much about fishing. So I always say, open up a Word document and just click dictate, and then spend 30 minutes talking about what you know, right? So if you're a marketer and you're talking about your product, talk about it for 30 minutes. And if you talk for 30 minutes, you usually get about 8 pages of single-spaced content. That's a lot of content.
That's a lot of content.
But then from there, you can look and start finding the paragraphs and the different points in a story that you can start to put together. But I'll summarize the question by saying the opportunity that's missed when it comes to scripting is you should be telling a story.
So tell me about the relationship between having a script and telling a story and being a good listener when it comes to, just being a helpful salesperson.
So that's another great question. Love it. So,
hey, I'm trying to learn to perfect my own sales pitch. This is
I
like
love it.
free consulting, 30 minutes right here.
I love it. So here's the key with listening from my point of view. I think when we're doing a demo, let's say we're in a 30-minute demo, we talk really fast and we're so afraid of missing things because you know what, that one time I sold Wendy that product, I said this, I got to make sure I say that, and I got to make sure I say this. And we're just forcing so much out. This is why scripting is really important, because I don't need to give you 12 sentences to make one point. I want to make that one point in one line. And if I really focus on my scripting and kind of where it sits in my presentation, in theory, to me, the best presentations are a couple minutes of rapport building, 7-8 minutes of actual talking and demo. This isn't a 30-minute. And then if you've laid out your scripting correctly, you'll spend the next, 18, 20 minutes having laid breadcrumbs out. So the prospect's going to ask you the right questions, right? So that's one of the things you want to do. You want to make them the hero of the story and let them ask the questions. So I think it's definitely active listening, because you absolutely want to make sure that you're finding their particular pain point. But again, if you've laid it out properly, you don't have to talk the whole time. You don't have to push your solution and try and shoehorn it. You can say, hey, listen, here's what we do. Here's what I've looked into about your company. Here's where I think we might be a fit. But let me ask you, Wendy, what questions do you have after, going through that 7-8 minutes? Yeah. So that's typically how I attack it.
I bet there's a lot of mapping between needs and solutions and helping, like you said, lead this person towards those solutions. Dynamic, active conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another point that I, used to train a lot of my people on, is that you don't want to have one pitch, because if you just have one pitch, you really can only relay that to one person. You want to have the base, the foundation of your pitch, but then it's really 20 different versions based on the prospect's pain point, right? And that's where you want to go. And that's where, I was saying shoehorning, well, I have to say this because this is what I say, right? As opposed to, okay, let me definitely lay out some part of the presentation, but let me then find out what their needs are, and then I'll guide the rest of the presentation that way.
Yeah, I know with TREW Marketing, when I'm talking to a prospect, there's some distinct personas that I'm talking with. And so, for instance, one is an executive who has an engineering background and knows nothing about marketing except their marketing is not good. And then I'll have a marketing person. So maybe a one person marketing person that knows they need help. And those are very different conversations, as you might imagine. So at the end of the day, they may need the same solution, but the path in which we get there looks completely different.
Yes, 100%. No, you're bang on there. Bang on there.
Yeah. So tell me about the relationship between this script in these conversations
Yep.
and supporting content that leads somebody to this moment and then takes them forward after this moment.
Oh wow, that's a whole other podcast. Another great question. Um, I think the best way to look at it is that when I produce content, and that's how I get my business. I came off the cruise industry. My industry went on lockdown, so I don't have
Yes,
people to
it
refer me
did.
business because my area of expertise kind of got shut down. So, you know, when I create content, this is what's interesting from my point of view, is I've learned this over the last 3 months. When I talk about a particular subject, people then want solutions based on that subject, right? If I talk about something completely different, the same people are watching, but a different category of those people will now reach out to me about that second thing I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So there's ways using content, as a marketer that you can, I said 20 different presentations. Well, in theory, you could have 20 different pieces of content that lead all those 20 different people through those conversations. So I think really understanding, in the discovery phase, and this is another place, and I am not an expert in this. I mean, my expert on discovery is again, really B2C, but I'm following a lot of people in B2B. And so if you create the content, you get them interested in one thing, then what are the questions that you're asking to find out if that's really their pain point that you think it is, confirming that. Is there secondary issues that they also need to solve, right? So really tracking them, and especially if you're not a big company, and I've worked at a lot of small companies, you really need to track that process. You really need to have those notes and whatever personalized CRM you're using, but understanding what did they come in the door for, and make sure that's what I'm trying to put in their hand for them to leave with.
You know what I love about what you just described too is look at the wealth of information that the salesperson is picking up as they're digging into the pain point. So what was the perceived pain point? And then it might be different, it may evolve as you explore further, but that's so informative to marketing as you think about what messages to lead with, what types of content to create to
Right.
speak to those pain points, and even be there as they're searching on those pain points.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about, so you have a broadcast background,
I do.
and I know in looking again, if anybody goes to your LinkedIn profile, they immediately see you talking. You have a lot of video content. So why video? And when did you start that? And what results have you seen?
Okay, so why video? So I knew I had, an advantage just because of broadcast background and using video, and I use a lot of video in the cruise business. But this was where, it wasn't imposter syndrome, but there was a fear for me when I started putting videos out in October, and it was because I'm connected to CEOs of cruise lines, right? And my videos are a little bit tongue in cheek, a little bit funny, or at least I try. So there was a big hesitation in actually putting that out. And if you actually go to my posts, it's only videos except for one document that was in there to explain something about videos. And what I've tried to do, and this has all been kind of learning on the fly, is one thing is that the look of my video is always the same, and you can always expect it to be a video. And then to the point where now I've started marking, like in a big stamp on the top, how long the video is going to be, what kind of commitment I'm asking for. And it's interesting watching the dynamic of building this tribe of people who I can bring value to with these thoughts I have about, whether it's sales or sales presentations or negotiation, wherever it is. And here's the interesting thing. I've only posted I think 16 videos since October. I was doing twice a week, and now I have it down to once a week. And it is in weeks, in 5-6 weeks, I had a lot of work coming in for Q1. This is starting from a dead stop.
Okay.
And at the end of 3 months, now I'm turning work away, right? But it's because I can. right? Now, the bigger problem is how am I going to scale what I'm doing, right?
Of course.
So that I'm not turning people away. But it was really interesting to see, what I thought my perceived value was, right? And now by putting content out there, people are looking at it in a different way, right? Because I'm not trying to sell them. They're sitting on their couch. They're committed to 10 minutes of scrolling through LinkedIn. Can I hook them? Can I get them interested in what I'm talking about? Am I bringing value? And we hear that a lot. To me, that was like a big thing in 2020 is how are you providing value? But I've seen it work for me. When I offer value, people are like, wow, that's really good. Which led to the next thing of how do I get better at qualifying people? Because I'm also a cruise ship guy, right? I'm like, oh, you want to talk? Let's talk. Let's have a conversation.
I'll talk to anybody all the time. Come on. Yeah.
Right? So I've had to streamline that. But one thing I have always been a Gary Vaynerchuk disciple, and one thing he keeps saying, even to this day, there's not enough content on LinkedIn. And there's not enough video content on LinkedIn. Yeah. And instead of trying to be on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook, I've focused solely on LinkedIn. And the reason is, let me try and master this platform. And also that's where my people are, right? I mean, do they have an Instagram account? Sure, I'm sure they do, but that's not where they're thinking about business. Yep. They're thinking about business on LinkedIn, right? So that's where I've committed to being.
Yeah. And when it comes to, so we study how engineers seek and consume information to make purchase decisions, do this research study every year. And LinkedIn always comes in as the top social channel after industry networking groups. So think like associations that have their own sort of online social communities. So same with us. In fact, I have a LinkedIn podcast series coming up. So we're kind of preceding this a little bit. I may have to put this episode in with it. That was perfect that you brought it up. And LinkedIn, boy, they've made a lot of changes to their platform in the past 6 months, and it looks like they'll continue to do so. What are some changes that you've noticed and ways in which you've changed to fully take advantage of LinkedIn?
So they are looking for engagement. That is everything I've done and everyone I follow and all this information I'm trying to curate for myself of the best technique is that they want engagement. So a big part of what I do is I budget 2 hours a day to what I call business development. That's partially creating content, but then engaging on the content, right? And engaging with other people's content. And the two side effects are, one, LinkedIn sees that, so my content is going to have a much larger range. But the other is that the people this is interesting. I did it. Sorry, I'm going to sidetrack a little bit. I told people in a video I did last week, if you're going to do this strategy, you need 50 new friends, 50 people outside of your network, right? That you want to be engaging with, but in complementary businesses. Okay. So what I said was, to actually go out and build this is by engaging on people's content. And if you really want a meeting with someone, go comment on their post for 10 days in a row and then send an invite, see if they say yes.
Oh, that would get someone's attention.
It really does. But this is where I took it a step further. And this was, in my mind, I'm like, why is not everyone doing this? I'd meet these people, we're in complementary spaces, and I'd say, hey, Wendy, let's get on a call. Why do you want to do that, Nick? Well, we're commenting on each other's posts every day. So two things. One, if I understand what you do exactly, Wendy, I can better refer people to you, right? Because that's if I'm networking by engaging in other people's content. But the other thing is, if I have a conversation with you and really understand your business, something I'm not going to glean from just watching your post, I can comment better on what you're talking about, right? So then what happens is if I have someone who's got really great content and has a lot of followers and I understand their business, and then I can give really good insight when they have a post that's trending up, if I can become the most relevant comment, well, now if they have, 3,000 people looking at that post, 3,000 people, maybe not three, maybe just 300 will look at the most relevant content or comment, excuse me. So that's 300 people who maybe didn't know me before.
Yeah.
And now we're like,
it's a big reach all of a sudden and very relevant.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And what I like about that is you're coming from a place of authenticity, right? This is complementary to my business. I understand, and I'm actually interested in what this person is doing. And so I really appreciate that approach.
Well, and for me, it's how I am naturally. And then people ask me, well, what if I'm in sales and I'm an introvert? And that's a really interesting question because you can be a very technical seller. Every time I bought a television, I've gone to Best Buy and I want to talk to the person who knows most about TVs, right? They might not be the most persuasive or exciting, but because they're so technical.
Yeah.
But if you are technical, you see, I really feel that if you can start to think about how can I be more relational, just a little bit. And I don't tell people have to be who they are. You got to sell the way you are. But I think some people, especially if they're selling a lot of technical stuff, they're like, well, I just sell technical. This is it. You can take it or leave it. Right. But there's stories to it.
Absolutely.
Which I'm sure we'll get into.
Well, maybe we should get into it right now.
Okay.
I feel like that was a teaser.
So
let's talk about stories. Wait. If someone's technical and they know their product really well, why do they need a story?
Well, okay. So, and this is, for your audience specifically, I think it's an opportunity missed. So if I'm selling you a Swiss watch, I'm selling you an emotional purchase. You don't need a $5,000 Swiss watch, right? But you want a $5,000.
It's not much of a need. No,
not much of a need. But if I'm selling something technical, so years ago, I did some consulting for a huge window and door manufacturer in Canada, and it's windows, right? What do you think about when you think of windows?
Well, I want them to, protect me from the elements and
Yep.
bring in some light and
Yep.
yeah.
Right. And those are technical things, right? Especially in Canada, I want to keep the cold out, right? I want to make sure that it's a good quality window.
In Texas, we want to keep the heat out.
Right. So the way that I look at that is that, okay, well, if we're talking about windows, people don't really care about the specs of a window, right? I mean, they do, but it's not something they're going to really dig into and like go through
No.
What they're thinking about is how's the light going to come in?
Mhm.
How is upgrading my windows going to change the dynamic of how me and my family play in the family room, right? Because now I have a better quality light coming in, right? Because when I didn't have good quality windows, it was hot in there all the time. I had the drapes closed, but now this keeps the elements out, keeps the heat out in Texas. Now I can have all this beautiful sunlight coming in, right?
Yep.
So that's just off the top of my head, but it's that same kind of idea is what's the benefit, right?
And you have table stakes, right? Every window should do certain functions, but I see what you're saying, having the story about this more of an emotional connection to why this window and what it does to your life personally.
And I'll tell you, I really believe that every sale is a B2C sale on some level, even if it's very technical. Even if you're taking a technical product and selling it to a technical person, they still have an issue that your product can solve, right? So we say pain point, but pain is emotional, right? Whether it's physical or mental anguish, it's called a pain point because there is something that needs to be remedied, right? So by telling it as a story, and listen, it depends on who you're talking to. If I'm talking to someone who's super technical, I'm probably going to keep it way more technical.
Yeah.
But I also want to, poke a little bit and see if I open up this door, right? And an easy way to do it, this is, one of my favorite things to do, and I do it before I talk to everybody, is go through people's LinkedIn profiles and find Easter eggs, right? Where are they from? What did they study? Where did they go to school? Is what they studied in school relevant to what they're doing today, right? So people have strange accreditations. One of the biggest sales I ever closed was a guy had in there that he was a certified youth hockey coach.
Oh.
So I opened that up. I'm like, oh, hockey coach, did you play? I did. And that conversation, we didn't do any discovery in the first meeting. We talked about hockey for almost the whole time. And it's like, okay, let's get right to the second meeting. I'm like, okay, great. Right? So I think sometimes when you find first of all, even if someone's very technical, the point that you put the time in to looking and then asking those questions, I find is interesting. But then also ask it as a question. So one of the things that's been really big the last couple of years is like these major universities offer like an 8-week online course, right? And people will put that on their LinkedIn profile. Hey, I see you took that contract negotiation course at such and such a school. What was the best takeaway? Like, what was the key thing you learned, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not just noting that, hey, I saw that you took it. Now I'm making you the hero by asking you, teach me something. Teach me something you learned because you went to the trouble to do that.
Neat. And then you probably get something out of that conversation too, just aside from building a relationship and a rapport. But hey, that's pretty interesting. I'd want to know.
Uh, but you know what's interesting about it? When you do that, it catches people off guard,
Hmm.
right? And here's actually, this one's even easier. And this happens a lot. If you're doing, 20 calls a week, you're going to have 2 or 3 of these a week. Go through the mutual connections, because we assume it's industry people, right? I cannot tell you how many times, hey, do you actually know so and so? Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
worked with them at X. I'm like, that's my brother-in-law. You're kidding. You're
Oh,
kidding,
wow. Yeah.
right? So
Golden.
I've had relatives, I've had friends, I've had, and sometimes it's like, hey, just curious. I know we have a lot of connections on LinkedIn, but do you actually know? So yeah, I
And
worked with
then
so and so.
you have the awkward, no, they just linked in with me and I don't really know them.
And that's cool. And then we can
Yeah.
pivot straight into the agenda. But what did I do?
Right.
I pushed on the door just a little bit to see if I could open it more than a crack.
Yeah.
And if they didn't want to open the door, no problem. We'll keep the door closed and we'll get to the agenda. But if you find that kind of commonality, like who do you actually know together? Well, what
Hmm.
just happened? I just got vetted, right? I
Yeah.
just got
Just
vetted by
like
my
that.
brother-in-law, right? That
Thanks,
changes,
dude.
yeah, right? But it
You didn't have to
changes the
do anything.
whole conversation. It
Yeah.
changes the whole conversation.
For sure. Well, thinking from a salesperson's point of view, what are a couple of key pieces of content or other ways marketing can help set the salesperson up for success when they go to do these first initial outreach, connections?
So, and that's a great question. And I think often we have such a disconnect between marketing and sales for a lot of reasons. But when I in the cruise industry was in a marketing role, I would ask my salespeople, what tools do you need? How can I support you? And because I would catch myself. I'm like, oh, I think as a marketer, I have a clever idea right now. This is what we're going to build it around, but is that actually valuable
Uh-huh.
to the salesperson? Right.
Yeah.
I think that communication and having these frank conversations and interview your salespeople like you're the salesperson and they're the prospect, right?
Mm.
Like, don't just say, hey, shoot me an idea.
Oh,
Say, hey,
no.
Wendy, can we sit down for 30 minutes? Can we just budget off 30 minutes? Let me interview you. Let me ask you questions. What do people ask you? Where do you get stuck in a conversation?
Mhm.
Do people compliment on the deck where they say, oh, can you go back on that? So just having those conversations, that communication, I think is really key. And that just goes to internal
It
relationship
sure
building,
does.
right?
I think that's wonderful advice. And there isn't some one size fits all formula when it comes to sales enablement content. And I think there couldn't be a more important thing than to build that relationship and listen and be in their shoes and understand how you can fit in. So good
But
advice.
you're in marketing, Wendy. How often does that happen?
Well, I'm in marketing. So my background is in marketing, but I've been the lead salesperson for True Marketing for 13 years. So there
Right,
you go.
right,
So I
right.
see both sides, and it's been an eye-opening experience when, the marketers for True create the marketing plan and they come to me with ideas and I'll say, but why? Why are we pushing that and why focus on that this quarter? Is that really a service that we want more business for, but yet that's your content push? So I ask a lot of tough questions and I can feel people getting a little uncomfortable, and it's good tension, but it also, I think, was a reminder to the group sometimes of, oh, we probably should have had that meeting first before I rolled out the plan. So I try to be very, represented as it is,
Right.
and it can be good, but I think that tension is important, and the jobs are very different, but we're all trying to achieve the same goal. So that spirit of camaraderie is important, and of communication.
And you know what? I think for me, it was just nailed into me in the cruise business because, I worked on 36 different ships as a contract employee. So I'd have to drop in as a department of one person when there's 1,200 people there. So the restaurant department's got 200 people. I'm the one who has to fit in, right? I'm the one who has to bring value to my team members, to the hotel director, to the food and beverage
Hmm.
manager. How do I do that, right? How
Yeah.
how do I become part of the hotel? And I just see that as an opportunity that's missed in a lot of companies. There's a big disconnect there.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit. You have a podcast also. It's called
Do
the Sales Pitching Podcast.
the sales pitching podcast. Absolutely. You can totally find me there. We talk to entrepreneurs there about, their battle, when they, laced up their boots and went to go and blaze a trail. But primarily I'm on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is where I spend a lot of my time. And, I really think if people are not taking advantage, especially with content on LinkedIn right now, especially video content,
Mm-hmm.
there's easy ways to move heavy mountains really quickly if you just focus.
Great. Well, everyone, look for Nick on LinkedIn, look for the Sales Pitching Podcast, and start to create video content on LinkedIn. Sounds like those are important words. Any other parting advice?
Oh man. Just do it. Just step and the ledge will appear.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Nick. Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.